I'm going to open this evening by sharing with you the scariest thing I did on vacation this past summer. Now, you may remember what I did last summer. So you might think that what we did this past summer was the scariest thing, but it was not. Now, the scariest thing that I did this past summer was choose what reading material I would bring on our family vacation. Anti-Judaism by David Nierenberg, Joshua Leffer's Tablet Shattered, The End of an American Jewish Century and the Future of Jewish Life, or The Atlantic's article that stopped many of us in our tracks, Franklin Foer's The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending. So after this difficult and fear-filled year, I found myself wanting to better understand the history of anti-Semitism from its very beginnings until now, to understand whether today's anti-Semitism is different from the past. I mean, it seems like it is. ADL reports that in the years since October 7th, more than 10,000 incidents of anti-Semitism have been documented in the United States. Most involved verbal and written harassment or vandalism, and a minority involved physical assault. And the savage anti-Semitism that brutalized Jews in Israel on October 7th, well, it felt like a pogrom, more akin to the Cossack attacks in the Pale of Settlement in the Russian Empire, a time when Jews had very little power in the world, than a terrible episode in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at a time when Jews have sovereignty in the land of Israel. Nagazi Hamad of the Hamas Political Bureau explained that the attack was a first step in the annihilation of the Jewish people, whose state must be removed by any means necessary. According to him, October 7th was just the beginning. And I was both shocked and not shocked to receive this picture from a friend just days ago. This is an overpass not even a mile from where I grew up in St. Louis County. And this past year, anti-Semitism in the US has been felt most acutely by our young people on college campuses. The most extreme threats were to their physical safety, while more pervasive were incidents with encampments and protests that sometimes were peaceful. Sometimes they were peaceful, but other times they gave way to a darker and more insidious environment on campuses. This picture was taken at a protest on the DePaul campus on Monday. Need I say how disturbing it is to see students on a college campus in Chicago repeating the sentiments of a Hamas terrorist who calls for the annihilation of the Jewish state and the Jews who live there. With that kind of hate, I don't think Jewish students feel very safe. And I don't think that they feel safe here. Today's anti-Semitism feels different, and it has all but unhinged many in our community. So I set forth this summer to read and try to learn more about its history and evolution. And if I'm honest, at the root of this was that I wanted more information because I am scared as well. And how I deal with my fear is with information. If I can learn more, maybe I will understand more and know what to do to be less afraid. As the late 18th century Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav said, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od. All the world is a very narrow bridge. V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. The key is to not be afraid at all. So I learned about anti-Semitism's history from the burning of a synagogue in ancient Egypt to claims of blood libel, accusations that Jews needed the blood of non-Jewish children to make matzah, to the relegation of Jewish citizens to second-class status, forced to wear specified clothing, and unable to live among other citizens in Christian and Muslim countries. Now, after the French Revolution, Jews were entitled to citizenship and thought that this would finally save them from anti-Semitism. And that was the gestalt of many of the German Jews, most who would become Reform Jews, who came to America in the early 19th century and built liberal institutions to safeguard themselves, even as they experienced quotas. As Forer wrote, over the course of the 20th century, Jews invested their faith in a distinct strain of liberalism that combined robust civil liberties, the protection of minority rights, and the ethos of cultural pluralism. And they embraced this brand of liberalism because it was good for America and good for the Jews. And it was their fervent hope that liberalism would inoculate America against the world's oldest hatred. And that's why Forer's article chilled us to our bones when he wrote, "Anti-Semitism on the right and the left threatens to bring to a close an unprecedented period of safety and prosperity for Jewish Americans and demolish the liberal order they helped establish." And while Theodor Herzl became the grandfather of Zionism, did you know that originally his big idea of what would save the Jews from anti-Semitism in Western Europe was assimilation? He set forth that idea, which included mass conversion to Christianity in 1894, the same year he scoffed at the idea of Zionism, writing that it would never work because the Jews had long ago ceased to be a people. Yet once he realized that anti-Semitism was so pervasive in Europe that Jewish converts were as despised as Jews, he shifted to the Zionism ideal. In his opus, The Jewish State, he wrote, "Palestine is our unforgettable historic homeland. The Jews who will it shall achieve their state. We shall live at last as free men on our own soil, and in our own homes we will peacefully die." Many American Jews held on to that hope. Israel will keep us safe. Should something go wrong here, American Jews could go there. From the IDF to high tech, the promise of Israel's security reassured Jews, many Jews in the diaspora. And a child of the 80s, I remember trick-or-treating with Jewish friends, knocking on doors with a pillowcase in one hand for the candy and a J&F can in the other for tzedakah. Yet early on, for many of the Jews who invested their faith in that distinct strain of liberalism, the idea of Zionism seemed unfavorable on many levels. Why create a giant ghetto for the Jews? It was not until 1937 that the Reform movement endorsed the notion of a modern Jewish state in the land of Israel. And the inheritors of this liberalism, many of them loving critics of Zion, had wanted to make sure that the Jewish state upholds the same ideals of civil liberties, protection of minority rights, and the ethos of pluralism. And when strains of Israeli society, some of whom are now in vital positions of government, act in direct opposition to these ideals with Muslim, Christian, Armenian, and progressive Jewish citizens of Israel, and Palestinian civilians in the West Bank and Gaza, liberal Jewish Zionists sound the alarm. And many wars and moral dilemmas with Israel's neighbors poked holes in Herzl's optimism, but nothing like October 7th. It was not a surprise that Hamas terrorists wanted to attack Israelis, but that despite the high tech and the IDF, we were so vulnerable in this attack. That's what was so chilling. And it reawakened in many of us the existential fear that Iran, through militants including Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis, could wipe Israel off the map. That terrifies us. And the anti-Semitism that has sprung up here in its wake has profoundly unsettled us. Today there is a complicated entanglement of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And at the risk of oversimplification, I generally disentangle them in the following way. Criticism of the government of Israel and its actions, by and large, not anti-Semitic. Holding all Jews responsible for that government, anti-Semitic. Equating the term Zionist with Jews who support the Israeli government and then excluding Zionist Jews from social, civic, and activist circles, anti-Semitic. Advocating for Jews' erasure from the land of Israel, anti-Semitic. Franklin Foer characterizes it another way. He explains that anti-Semitism always returns to the same trope. Jews have a bloodthirsty lust for power, and when anti-Zionism takes a similar form, the dehumanization, the unilateral casting of blame, the fetishizing of Jewish villainy, then it slips into anti-Semitism. The two things many American Jews thought would save us, or at least safeguard us from anti-Semitism, were attacked this year. The centrality of Jews in American life, and a strong Israel able to fend off any foe. So no wonder we are so afraid. And while it's helpful to understand all this better, it certainly did not help allay my fears, maybe not yours either. Context did not cure my anxiety, because the real question is, what do we do now? And I've been proud of so many in our community who have taken bold actions and time and treasure to continue to support and build the very best in Israeli society and work to protect our security both there and here in America to help keep us safe from anti-Semitism. And there is so much that is out of our control these days. Our vigilance cannot safeguard us completely in this unsettling time. So what are we to do? Well, the place where I found the most cogent answers were from the only book that in the end I decided to take with me on my vacation this summer. And it's this, Man's Search for Meaning. This book by Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist Viktor Frankl chronicles his experience in concentration camps. And I dog-eared and underlined so many pages and passages like, we had to learn ourselves that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. And his observation that, in his words, some of his fellow prisoners acted like swine and others like saints, and each person has both personalities within them. Which one is actualized depends on decisions, not on conditions. And the idea that at any moment each one of us must decide, for better or for worse, what will be the monument of our existence. Frankl reminds us that no matter life's circumstance, we have an inner spirit and spiritual freedom that can continue to guide us. And these are the questions we ask ourselves on Yom Kippur. Who am I called to be? Not in the easy moments of life, but in the most difficult. In his words, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. When circumstances swirl and they feel out of our control, he tells us to ground ourselves in what we can control. Or in the words of the forewords Jody Ruderin, take the long view. When we can't control all the spewing of Jew hatred and Islamophobia, or distorted propaganda, or whether and how Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas attacks Israel, we can, in each case, respond with integrity, a long view. A long view enables us to understand that we are not frozen in this time of Jewish history. There are times in our story of the Jewish people when we are ascending, and we have holidays that celebrate that. Our exodus from Egypt on Passover, the rededication of our temple in Jerusalem on Hanukkah. And there are times when we are descending, and we have holidays that commemorate that. The 6 million Jews and 5 million others who were murdered during the Holocaust on Yom HaShoah. Exiles and pogroms and the destruction of the first and second temples on Tisha B'Av. The long view reminds us of the oscillating nature of the story of the Jewish people. And many have been buttressed by the words of Sarit Zussman at her son Ben's funeral. She said, "Our story will have a good ending." But my coda to that is that our story, the story of the Jewish people, will never end. We are in this moment in our people's history, but our story lives on after us, and it will be determined by what we do in this moment. The long view allows us to recognize our place in Jewish history and ask ourselves, what will be the monument of my existence? We cannot sit this one out. The time we're living in requires us to be strong and gentle, humble and proud, with an integrity that we build in ourselves by being part of this community and showing up for one another, and not just for the Jews in this room, but for those from other faiths who know us, who see our humanity and cast their lot with us and ours with them. Yom Kippur gives us precious hours to contemplate how we can step into the new year with a renewed commitment to enhancing Jewish life, our own and that of our community, through consciously making more time for Jewish learning, prayer, mitzvot, through opening our eyes to Jews in need here and around the world, through taking action to carry on our traditions of tzedakah, telling great old Jewish jokes, lighting candles on holidays like Sukkot and Simchat Torah and Shabbat, through making intentional choices to help keep us growing in our Jewish lives. You're here this evening, and I'm here to gather strength to be the people we are meant to be. And that requires courage. Moses uttered the words that we will hear tomorrow at an uncertain time. At that time, the Jews were poised to move into a perilous future, sure to be filled with violence and fear. And Moses did not know how the next chapter in the Jewish story would turn out, but he did know what, if they took the long view, would save them. The mitzvah of being Jewish is in your mouth, in your heart, so that you can live by it, and despite fear, choose life. When we are this afraid, we just might forget to live Judaism joyously, to learn to slow down on Shabbat, to partner with God and with others to heal this broken world. So one last word. There's a little Hebrew in this, so stay with me. I think it'll be worth it. You'll let me know after the service whether it was. I, like some of you, grew up at a Jewish summer camp where we sang those words of Rabbi Nachman, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tzar ma'od, all the world is a very narrow bridge, va'ikar lo lefachad klal, but the key is to not be afraid at all. And as much as I loved singing that song, living by it seemed nearly impossible. And it wasn't until much later that I learned that this was not his actual teaching. He did not use the word lefached, to be afraid. He used its reflexive form, lehitpached, to not cause oneself to be afraid. And with this subtle shift, his teaching then becomes about courage. We have no choice sometimes but to be afraid. Fear is unavoidable on this narrow bridge of life. But we can choose to not frighten ourselves more by the things beyond our control. We can choose not to exacerbate our anxieties. The Jewish story is an eternal saga, and it requires us to step into this new year with courage. Don't be overly afraid about the things you can't change. Change what you can, yourself. And with that, I'll say, Gemar Chatima Tova. May you and yours be sealed in the book of life for good.
Amen.
Lo lahit